Hi, my name is Allie Thomas, the Education Coordinator for the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. Today I'll be talking about wildlife tracking in your backwoods. Wildlife tracking is a great way to get more familiar with the animals that utilize your woods as habitat. Please note, for the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing on tracks made on the ground, whether they're in snow, mud, or another substrate. But please note that tracking involves many different types of sign, and all are very helpful in determining what species are present and what they are doing in that habitat. There are many pieces to the puzzle of tracking wild animals, and all are very helpful at uncovering the mystery of wildlife presence and movement. Also, it is important to have a basic understanding of the type of habitat you are in and what type of species typically are found in that habitat. But just quickly, I will go over other sign that you may see in your backyard woods. For example, scrapes made by animals' antlers or claws, scent marking, scat, raised leg urination left behind by canine species such as fox and coyote, chews or browse, dens, kill sites, and once again, tracks left behind by feet. It's important to note the variable conditions in which you will be tracking. Whether it is recently or currently raining will change the quality of the print left behind. Wind can change its size or shape, and all of this is dependent on the surface, whether you're tracking in snow or mud. Wintertime is a fantastic time to go out into your woods and look for wild animal prints. However, if it's too deep, it becomes very difficult. Also, it's helpful to understand which animals are active during certain times of year and when they are less active or maybe even dormant. Conditions are always changing in your backyard woods, and these all play a role in your ability to track wild animals. Wildlife tracking can get complicated quickly, with the many different terms used, as well as all the variables to take into account when trying to understand the movement of a wild animal. However, for the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing on the basic characteristics that distinguish different groups of species that you could find in your Vermont backwoods. It is important, though, to understand a few terms when looking at a group of tracks. One is the stride. The stride is taken from the toe of the front foot to the toe of a hind foot on the same side. Straddle is the distance to the inside of the track from the center line through what would be the center of the animal. And group is the entire set of 2 front and 2 hind feet. Gaits are the speed at which an animal is moving, whether it's walking, running, trotting, galloping. That all changes the pattern in which an animal's tracks will be left behind. During this presentation, I won't focus on all the different gaits possible within each species, but on the ones most commonly seen in the woods. And finally, digigrade is when animals walk just on their digits or toes, and plantigrade is when they plant their entire foot onto the substrate. It's important while tracking to have an understanding of the different groups of species that are present in Vermont. Each of these groups have unique characteristics in their tracks that separate them from the other groups. Now, this isn't a comprehensive list of all the species in Vermont or all the groups of species, but these are the animals most often seen leaving prints behind in your backwoods. We have mustelids, canines, felines, rodents and shrews, cervids, rabbits and hare, bear, raccoon, marsupial, and birds. Each of these have different types of prints that help you as a tracker begin to identify what animals are present. The first group of animals I'll talk about are the mustelids, or the weasel family. Weasel family members often are considered bounders. The bounders from this group include the river otter, American fisher, pine marten, mink, long-tailed weasel, and short-tailed weasel, or ermine. They have long, lean bodies with short legs. Typically, the front feet go forward together, and the back feet also move together, landing in the same or a spot near the front where the front feet landed. Not all weasel family members are bounders. For example, the striped skunk have more of a waddle than a bounding movement, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. But if you look at the prints themselves, you notice that they have 5 toes that show in the tracks on both their front and hind feet. This is a distinguishing characteristic of weasel members. They have 5 toes, both on their front and hind feet. The first and fifth digits are separated from the 3 middle digits that are closely grouped together. This is often referred to as a 1-3-1 split, and a quick way to categorize a track as a mustelid track if the 5 front and 5 hind digits do appear in the substrate. As far as the track pattern goes in the snow or in the mud, weasel family members often have 2 feet marks that are diagonal to each other, as shown in the track pattern on the lower right. And finally, their interdigital pad. If you look at the second circle in the middle of the slide, you'll see it is in the shape of a chevron. This is a very distinguishing characteristic of weasels. The next group of animals are the canines. In Vermont, there are gray foxes, red foxes, and coyotes for wild canines. They are walkers and trotters. There are 4 toes present on both the front and the hind toes, and their tracks usually show claws. Now, this is with the exception of the gray fox, who often climbs trees and has semi-retractable claws. If you were to draw a line around the basic shape of a canine track, it would be a rectangle, and you can make a nice X through the middle of the track. Canines' front paws are larger than their back as they hold the majority of their weight in their torso. And in general, when walking, they first move the front foot on one side of their body, and then the back foot on the other side of their body. They often have direct deposit, meaning their hind foot hits in the same spot as the front foot did on the track. Specific gait patterns change with the speed they're moving, but a general walk or trot includes alternating front and back feet with close direct deposit. Canines often move in a trot gait. In this mode, the right foot and their left rear foot move simultaneously, and then the animal switches to the left front and the right rear foot. The overall pattern is a straight line. Domestic dog patterns are often much more variable, not only in size but in specific gaits. Domestic dogs have food at home and a safe bed to sleep in, so they have more energy for unnecessary movement. They typically not walk in a straight line. To tell the difference between coyotes and foxes, the straddle size is an important indicator. Coyotes have a larger straddle than fox family members. For red foxes, the details of the toes may be obscured since their feet are very furry and their toe pads are small. A distinct chevron pad across the foot pad helps to identify this species. Red fox tracks generally measure 1.75 to 2.5 inches long by 1.5 to 2 inches wide, pictured to the right. For gray foxes, the tracks often show toes more clearly as their feet are less furry than a red fox. Gray foxes, like mentioned earlier, can also retract their claws. The tracks fall into a smaller size range, measuring approximately 1.25 to 1.75 inches long. Next, we have the felines, or the cats. In Vermont, we have bobcat, Canada lynx, and an occasional mountain lion that passes through. Bobcat have the smallest prints, at about 2 1/4 inches wide. Canada lynx have much larger prints, as they've adapted to stay above the snow in very cold, snowy places in the state. You'll see the picture on the bottom right of a Canada lynx track in relation to an adult male hand. They're about 3 1/4 to 4 1/4 inches long. And lastly, the mountain lion. Mountain lion's tracks are anywhere between 3.5 and 5 inches long and have much larger pads within the print. Feline species in general have 4 toes, both on their front and hind feet. This is similar to canine. However, the difference is feline species typically do not show claws as they are retractable. If you were to draw a line around the outline of the track, it would be a square, unlike the rectangle of canines. Feline tracks are asymmetrical, with the second toe from the center longer than the other toes. And also, If you'll notice the area highlighted inside of the red circle, that's the interdigital pad. Felines have 2 bumps showing on the interdigital pad instead of 1, like canines. Next are the rodents and shrews. Now, the specific movement pattern of these different species does vary. However, many of them are considered hoppers. Hoppers' large hind feet are significantly longer than their front feet, and they jump by pushing off of their hind feet and landing onto their front feet, then swinging their back feet to the front. They leave sets of 4 tracks with their hind feet ahead of their front. Most members of the rodent group, such as mice, red squirrel, and gray squirrel, and the lagomorph group, the hare and cottontail rabbit, are hoppers. Shrews and chipmunks alter their pattern a little bit more than the other members of the hopping group. We also have North America's largest rodent, the beaver. Beavers are not hoppers, but they have a very distinguishing print and webbed hind feet that make it easy to identify them. And then there are the porcupines, which are slightly pigeon-toed, and they have long nails, and they often show their quills, especially in the snow. All rodents and shrews have 5 toes that show on their hind feet and 4 toes on their front feet, except for the beaver. The beaver has 5 toes on the front foot and the back foot. But again, the beaver is so distinguishing that it's hard to mix it up with any other animal. Next, we have the cervids. Cervids in Vermont include white-tailed deer and moose, and both are ungulograde, or animals that walk just on their toenails. Adult white-tailed deer have prints that are about 3.5 to 4.5 inches, whereas moose. Next, we have the lagomorphs, including cottontail rabbits and snowshoe hare. As previously discussed, these are hoppers, meaning their hind feet actually go in front of their front feet, leaving behind a track pattern with 2 hind feet in front that are in line with each other, and their 2 front feet alternating in the back. A very distinguishing characteristic of lagomorphs are their asymmetrical front feet. If you look at the red dotted line through the cottontail rabbit image, you'll see how asymmetrical their front feet really are. Cottontail rabbits' hind feet are anywhere between 3 inches long and 1.5 to 2 inches wide, whereas a snowshoe hare has a very large hind foot adapted to staying above snow and ice in very cold, snowy regions of the state. Their hind feet can be anywhere between 5 to 6 inches long and 3.5 to 4 inches wide. Next, we have the black bear. Now, black bear prints are most commonly found in the mud during the summertime, as during the winter they are undergoing torpor or sleeping. However, occasionally you may be walking through the woods in the winter and see black bear prints, as they do wake up and move around a bit at times before going back into their torpor. Black bears have 5 toes on both their front and hind legs and very large feet, with the front foot being about 4 inches long and the back being about 7. Black bears are good examples of large waddlers. They are plantigrade in that their entire foot hits the ground like humans when they walk. They have heavy bodies and short legs. Their walk is fairly slow, and when moving slowly, they move both feet on one side of the body, one at a time, and then shift their weight to move each foot on the other side of their body. The hind leg oversteps the front leg usually, and the hind foot, like mentioned earlier, is bigger than the front foot. Occasionally people like to ask me, what's the difference between a black bear foot and a grizzly foot? Now, please note, we do not have grizzly bears in Vermont. However, sometimes people travel out west and would like to know the difference. So if you look at the bottom right image in the slide, you'll notice there's a line through both of those front bear paws. On the left is a black bear, and the line from the inner toe on the right of the foot to the outer toe on the left goes to the very tip of it in a black bear. If you were to draw that same line from the inner toe on a grizzly bear, it intersects through the middle of the grizzly bear's outer toe. That is how you can tell the difference. And grizzly bears sometimes have much larger claws showing. Another waddler is the raccoon. Raccoons have 5 human-like bulbous toes on both their front and hind feet. You find them often because they are prolific animals that can be found in all different habitat types, including urban areas. However, they do prefer to be around water, so it's common to see their prints in the mud near streams or lakes. Next, we have North America's only marsupial, the Virginia opossum, which continues to increase its range throughout the state. Virginia opossums have very distinctive track patterns. On their hind feet, they have thumbs that are close to right angles with the rest of their toes, enabling them to be very good climbers. Their front feet are about 2 1/4 inches wide by 2 1/2 inches long. And their hind feet are 2 3/4 inches wide by 3 inches long. These too can be found in many different environments as they are a very prolific animal found in both woodlands and urban areas. Finally, the last group is the birds. Now, the best way to determine which bird species you have in your backyard woods is by taking out binoculars and listening to calls and songs. However, you can track them, and during the winter months it's the best time to do so because the snow provides such a great substrate for their prints. But please note, because so many bird species migrate out of Vermont during the winter time, this may not be a comprehensive look at the diversity of bird species utilizing your backyard woods. But during the wintertime, you may find some wild turkey tracks. These are large tracks, about 3 1/2 inches large, with 3 big toes going forward and 1 back. You may find ruffed grouse tracks waddling through your woods, oftentimes showing a little bit of a trough next to the tracks because they are pretty large birds with short legs. Or ravens and crows with their pigeon-toed walk and tracks that are about 1 inch long. Every once in a while, you'll find wing patterns from a hawk or an owl that swoop down to pick up some prey species. If the prey is far enough into the snow, they almost can leave behind an entire print of their body. This concludes basic wildlife tracking in your backwoods. Hopefully, you've gained some knowledge in regards to the different groups of wildlife species and the distinguishing characteristics of their track patterns. For more information, please visit the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department's website and search wildlife tracks. Tracking is a great way to experience your woods and to begin figuring out what wildlife are present.